Okay, I see we've gotten more people. Just want to reintroduce myself. My name is Tamara. I am the president of Afro UPRIS. This is our candidate forum for district attorney. I'm going to pass it to Jamal.
Thanks, Tamara. Hi, everyone. My name is Jamal Williams again. I serve as the vice president under Tamara's awesome leadership for Afro UPRIS, and we are really looking forward to a very inspiring and informational discussion with our district attorney candidates for Santa Clara County. And I'm excited to we have Kiana Munoz from the African American Community Service Agency to moderate our panel. Kiana, would you like to introduce yourself?
Yes, hi everyone. My name is Kiana Munoz. Today I am solely here on my own as a new member of Afro UPRIS. But I'm happy to be here, happy to moderate, and I can't wait to get into this discussion as well.
Wonderful, thank you. So I'm going to bring our candidates forward as panelists. So just be on the lookout. That's going to pop up. Welcome.
Thank you. Glad to be here.
Good evening.
Hi. Welcome. Okay, so we're going to start with 1-minute introductions. We're going to alter the schedule a little bit. I know we've got one of our candidates that needs to leave and 15 minutes early. So let's do, Jeff, if you can give a 1-minute introduction to you and your campaign, your platform, and then we'll do the same thing with Sajid in just a second. So let me, I'm going to play my own timer and I'll just tell you when to stop. Go ahead.
Okay. Thank you very much, Tamara. Good evening. I'm Jeff Rosen. I'm the district attorney of Santa Clara County, and I'm running for re-election based on the practices of reform that works, keeping crime low by prosecuting crime, as well as preventing crime from happening in the first place, reducing incarceration. Under my leadership, we've reduced the jail population by 50% and the juvenile incarceration population by more than 80%. That has resulted in many, many fewer African-American adults and juveniles in custody. And at the same time, I've also worked very hard to increase trust between law enforcement and the communities that we serve. I've hired and promoted more African-American prosecutors than any district attorney before me. And I'm very proud of the Bend the Arc grants to address issues of racial inequity, $25,000 of which went to 5 African-American organizations, some of whom are represented here.
Thank you. Time's up. And Sajid.
Good evening, everybody. My name is Sajid Khan, and I'm running for Santa Clara County District Attorney. I'm the proud son of Muslim immigrants who raised me and my siblings here in the South Bay. I was born in San Jose, raised in Milpitas in San Jose. I'm a proud graduate of San Jose High School, and I'm now raising my 2 young sons here in the South Bay. For the last 13 and a half years, nearly 14 years, I've served our community as a public defender, fighting for the dignity and rights of our community's most marginalized people. I've been in our jails, I've been in our courtrooms, and I've been in our neighborhoods, and I've seen our current system inflict generational harm on communities of color, perpetuate the harms of mass incarceration and police brutality, and fail to keep us sustainably and collectively safe. And it's for those reasons that I'm now running for Santa Clara County DA, because I'm a commitment to healing systemic racism, fighting mass incarceration, and building a justice system that ensures and protects the dignity and safety of all people here in Santa Clara County, which again is the place that I've called home my entire life. And I look forward to this conversation.
Okay, very good. Both of you are pretty good on time. All right, I'm going to bring you back to Spotlight, and I'm going to pass it on to Kiana to start with our first question. And we'll just alternate for who's going first. So since Jeff Rosen went first on that last thing, Sajid will go first on this one.
Okay, Sajid. So the first question that we have for you is, what have you done for marginalized communities in Santa Clara County in your work capacity?
Thank you, Kiana. As I mentioned in my introductory comments, I've served this community for almost 14 years as a public defender, and I'm still working as a public defender to this day. I'm in our jails, I'm in our courtrooms, I'm in our juvenile hall, fighting for the rights, dignity, and healing of our most marginalized community members. As we know, the majority of individuals in our criminal legal system are people of color, are poor people. In Santa Clara County, there is a disproportionate representation of African American and Latinos, both in our juvenile justice system and in our adult criminal legal system. And I've been showing up every day, fighting for those individuals' rights and fighting for their dignity and ensuring that they don't become prey or fall prey to our systems of mass incarceration. In the same vein, I've been fighting against police brutality and unconstitutional police conduct by holding police accountable as a public defender, litigating motions, cross-examining police officers, and I will continue this spirit of fighting for the rights, dignity, and healing of our most marginalized people once elected DA. And lastly, I'll just say I've also partnered over the years with Silicon Valley Debug, which has pioneered the participatory defense movement and also has been on the front end of our communities fighting for police accountability. And I've partnered with them on a number of different community actions, and I will continue to do so once elected as DA.
Thank you so much. So for you as well as Mr. Rosen, I'm going to ask the same question. Just what have you done for marginalized communities in Santa Clara County with your capacity, with your work capacity?
So actually, I'm the only person running for DA who has held police officers accountable. I've prosecuted more than 60 police officers as the district attorney for crimes ranging from excessive use of force to drug trafficking, to fraud, bribery, perjury, assault, domestic violence, rape, child molestation, possession of child pornography, and murder. I'm one of the few district attorneys in the United States to ever successfully prosecute correctional officers for murder, the murder in our jail of Michael Tyree. In addition, as district attorney, I've worked very hard to reduce the footprint of the criminal justice system. It's why I supported Proposition 36, which reformed the 3 strikes law, and Proposition 47, which reduced drug possession, as well as other low-level theft crimes to misdemeanors. Those 2 propositions, which I supported, I was one of only 3 district attorneys and sheriffs in the entire state to support those, have resulted in thousands and thousands of fewer, primarily African-American and Latino individuals not going to jail or prison. I've also started a narcotics public safety policy, which sends people that are drug addicted to public health and not through the criminal justice system. Again, that's resulted in 7,000 fewer individuals, primarily African-American and Latino, not having a criminal record, not coming to court. So my record is very strong in this area. And while there's a lot that I've done, there's obviously more to do. And I'm very proud that I've been awarded the Wester Sweet Legal Activism Award by the NAACP. And there's more work for us to do together.
Thank you both. While I have you on here, Mr. Rosen, I will go ahead and ask you the next question. What is your plan to minimize the impact of the criminal justice system on the Black and Brown communities?
Well, there's many things that I have done, and there's more that I can do and we can do to minimize the impact of the criminal justice system on Black and Brown communities. So number one, just as evidence that we have minimized the impact on African Americans and Latinos, before I took office, our jail population was over 5,000. Today is around 2,300. A more than 50% decrease in the number of individuals incarcerated in our jail. That's because of policies that I've pursued as the district attorney. When I took office, our juvenile hall population and juvenile ranch population was around 400. Today, it's about 70. That's a more than 80% decrease in the number of juveniles that are held in custody. And while the percentages in terms of African American and Latinos has remained the same, the numbers of individuals are far, far fewer. And most days we have no girls in juvenile hall, in the juvenile hall population. In addition to that, I have community prosecutors that I put in zip codes in our community, which are heavily crime impacted and have a lot of youth crime and graffiti. And because of the efforts of those prosecutors, we've actually reduced crime in those zip codes by taking preventative steps, by providing after-school programs and other ways to provide positive things for youth to do. We also teach the Parent Project to thousands and thousands of families in our county, which has resulted in far fewer teenagers entering either the juvenile justice system or the adult criminal justice system when they get older. These are just some of the efforts that we've undertaken, and there's more to do to try to reduce the footprint of the criminal justice system while also keeping crime at historically low levels, which benefits everyone as well as working class communities of color. Thank you.
Thank you. And Mr. Khan, I'll go ahead and ask you the same question here. What is your plan to minimize the impact of the criminal justice system on our Black and Brown communities?
The first thing is that I'll be a truth teller. I'm proud to say Black Lives Matter, and I'm also proud to tell the truth about systemic racism that is at the core of our criminal legal system. The second thing is related to the jail population numbers that Mr. Rosen has cited. The reason that the jail population has been reduced are not because of Mr. Rosen's leadership or policies enacted by him. They are based upon policies that have been enacted in response to policies that Mr. Rosen has pursued that have resulted in a bloated jail population. Prop 36 and Prop 47 were initiated or were voted upon by California voters in response to our jails being full of people on low-level crimes like possession of methamphetamine and cocaine. I personally represented people that were being sent to prison under Mr. Rosen's watch for simple possession of simple drugs like methamphetamine and cocaine, and Prop 47 remedied that. Prop 36 was in response to the 3 strikes law being utilized to sentence people to prison for low-level crimes, and that was happening under the watch of Mr. Rosen. Our $0 bail schedule and the Humphrey decision have resulted in transformational change to cash bail in Santa Clara County in the state of California, and that was in response to district attorneys like Mr. Rosen utilizing cash bail to hold poor people and people of color in our jails, not because they're too risky to be released into our communities, but because they're too poor to pay. That was the reality under Mr. Rosen's watch, and is still the reality to this day. Gang enhancements are a critical source of systemic racism. 88% of gang enhancements in Santa Clara County are levied upon people of color, and they're rooted upon and they're based upon racist gang policing that are almost exclusively inflicted on communities of color in Santa Clara County. So if we want to address systemic racism, we need to do away with gang enhancements that don't make our communities safer, don't address the root causes of gang violence in our communities, and result in discriminatory impact on people of color in Santa Clara County. Police accountability is another critical source. In Santa Clara County, actually in the city of San Jose, there have been approximately 21 people killed by San Jose police officers in the last 5+ years. The majority of them have been people of color, and there have been 0 prosecutions of any of those police officers for a single crime. And that's not to mention the countless police officers that are engaging in racially discriminatory, unlawful racial profiling in our communities that are not being held to account by our current district attorney's office. Another area is prosecuting children as adults. Our incumbent DA has continued to prosecute children as adults, but the majority of which are children of color. He's prosecuted children as young as 14 and 15 years old, and fought the law that ended that inhumane, unproductive practice, which was SB 1391. He also fought the Racial Justice Act, which sought to undo and address systemic racism in our criminal legal system. So we need a leader that is, again, committed to truth telling about systemic racism and is committed to real transformational change that will cut at the core of the impact of our criminal legal system on communities of color. It'll be in changing our charging decisions. It'll be fighting for expansive diversion and diversion programs, restorative justice programs, as well as fighting for legislation on a statewide level, as opposed to fighting legislation that'll address these real harms.
Thank you, Mr. Khan. I want to keep you on just to in the spirit of the pattern that we have going on. And then in also the spirit of truth telling, I want you to think of this question and think outside of our current legal system. I'm jumping around in the questions a little bit. But what programs and policies would you implement as district attorney to reduce crime, reduce crime and increase public safety in the community, but thinking outside of our current legal system?
That goes to me first, Kiana. Thank you. The way we address or that we prevent harm from happening in the first place. Well, let me back up a second. It's critical that we zoom out on crime and harm in our community and seek to take a proactive response to preventing harm in order to prevent harm in Santa Clara County and beyond. As a public defender, I've been in our juvenile hall, I've been in our jail, and I've represented countless people who have been accused of and convicted of harms. And I've heard their stories. I've heard the stories and I've understood that harm and crime don't come in a vacuum. They're not a function of bad people. They're often a function of circumstance and context, things that could be remedied and in turn help us avoid harm from happening in the first place. It's critical that we reallocate resources away from things like pursuing the death penalty, prosecuting children as adults, utilizing county resources to oppose progressive reforms like the Racial Justice Act and SB 1391, and utilizing those resources on a county-wide level on the front end of our communities to ensure that we have trauma-informed care at our schools, to ensure that our teachers are adequately paid, to ensure that we have smaller classroom sizes, to ensure that we have mental health and substance abuse and trauma-informed treatment programs available in our community so that we can prevent trauma from occurring in the first place and prevent trauma from spiraling into harm outward into our community. So it really requires leadership from the DA's office to be a thought leader and advocate for, again, a reallocation of resources and an investment in the true dignity and safety of all people, including healthcare, education, vocational programs, so that people are whole and healed in our community and not resorting to harmful behavior. It's again also critical that when harm does occur, that we not simply respond with punitive responses, which has been my experience witnessing our current DA's office. We need to ask the question of why did this harm occur in our community, and what is the intervention and sentence and response that is necessary to address the root cause of the harm so it doesn't happen again. And also to ensure that survivors of harm receive services and restoration so that their hurt and their harm does not manifest in further harmful behavior in our community. And again, it requires us to invest in diversion programs, mental health and substance abuse treatment. Mr. Rosen mentioned the Parent Project, but he has not yet instituted a parent caregiver diversion program here in Santa Clara County. And those are things that we can do to, again, prevent harm from happening in the first place, and then when it does occur, prevent it from happening again.
Thank you so much. Mr. Rosen, I do want to turn the question for you, and then I will be asking you two more back-to-back just because I know that there are some time sensitivities, if that's okay with you.
Thank you so much. I think it is time for some truth telling, and I can't go back and correct every lie and mischaracterization that Mr. Khan has made, but I really think one of the things that's important in the criminal justice system is honesty and integrity and transparency. And we mentioned truth telling. I guess I would really like to know, and I think that your guests here and your members would really like to know why Sajid Khan hides and deletes blog posts that he's made where he glorifies Ray Rice, who beat his wife, a kidnapper and gang rapist that he represented, and Brock Turner, of course, who raped Chanel Miller, and all of these blog posts where Mr. Khan talks only about the defendant and never about the victim in these cases. Why has he deleted those blog posts? And are there other blog posts that he's also hidden from the voters? You know, in the prosecutor's office, if we hide evidence, that's misconduct. That's exactly what Mr. Khan is doing here. And to talk about, you know, a case that he handled of a 14-year-old back several years ago, what Mr. Khan doesn't tell you is that he wrote an email to our office thanking us for the reasonable and thoughtful disposition in that case. And since this is a Democratic club, I think an important question to point out is how many people who are running for DA voted for Barack Obama in 2012? I did. Did Mr. Khan? And if he didn't, maybe he can explain why. I read one of his deleted blog posts about it, but maybe he'll share that with you, maybe not. I can send you the blog post. There's many things I've done to reduce the footprint of the criminal justice system. Is there more work to be done? Absolutely. Are there things we've done outside of the box? Yes. In addition to the Parent Project and community prosecutors and the most progressive narcotics public safety policy and no cash bail. All of these things have shrunk our jail population. We use incarceration 40% less than counties in California. And as I say, we've dramatically reduced the number of juveniles that are incarcerated. Is there more work to be done? Yes. But at the same time, it's important for us to remember that the victims of crime in our community are disproportionately African American and Latino. And that's why my victim services unit is serving thousands and thousands of those victims every year with counseling, restitution, emergency food, and emergency shelter. We're proud of that and we'll continue to do that. That is a little bit of truth telling.
Thank you so much, Mr. Rosen, for your.
Can I respond, Ms. Munoz, or is the format not permit for that?
I was going to bring us back in the spirit of democracy tomorrow. How would you like to go about this one?
Kiana, I think that we should continue with the questioning as it was, just to be fair to both candidates in terms of response. So I think it's Mr. Rosen's turn. Then we can go to Mr. Sajid, and I think tomorrow's going to move us. We're going to move to something a little quicker to get some more questions in before Mr. Rosen has to go.
Definitely, yes. Just in the spirit of time, also to thank you both for being very honest with us and sharing both of your words. I think it's important for community to see, their candidates be able to speak. And we want to make sure that that comes through with the questions that we do ask. I will go back into the question for you, Mr. Rosen. It is, with the LGBTQ community under attack, how will you support the community here in San Jose and throughout the county?
That's a great question. And the first thing I want to tell you is I'm so proud to have the sole endorsement of BAYMAC for district attorney. And I'm really pleased that BAYMAC has recognized the special outreach that we've done to the gay and lesbian and LGBTQ plus community, working with the Billy DeFrank Center, participating in the Pride parades, and taking steps to make sure that victims of crime who are LGBTQ plus are treated with a victim-centered approach and with the cultural competence and sensitivity that is necessary. So I'm very pleased to have BAYMAC's strong endorsement. Under my leadership as district attorney, I have hired and promoted more LGBTQ plus individuals than any district attorney before me. And that doesn't surprise me. When you open the doors widely and you welcome everyone and you come from a perspective like I do, which is that there are great public servants who want to be prosecutors, who are of every race, every religion, every gender, and every sexual orientation, then you have a very diverse office. And an office I've hired, of the prosecutors I've hired, more than 50% are either African American, Latino, Asian American, or LGBTQ plus. So we'll continue to do special outreach to the LGBTQ plus community. When hate crimes are committed against LGBTQ plus individuals, I file and prosecute those as hate crimes. And I've done that several times in the last few years because I recognize the tremendous harm that's done not only to an individual, but to a whole community from a hate crime. And finally, something that's on the one hand small and insignificant, but also important. There are many bathrooms in the county government center, many, dozens of bathrooms. But until we looked into it in the DA's office and changed it, there was not one all-gender restroom, which created problems for staff and for members of the public. And it took us a lot of work to get that changed, but we did, because we want everyone to feel welcome when they come to the DA's office. Thank you.
Thank you. And so, Mr. Khan, I will ask you the same question. With the LGBTQ community under attack, how will you support the community here in San Jose and throughout the county?
Yeah, Mr. Rosen mentioned bathrooms, and it actually triggered a memory where one of my colleagues, her name is Carly Ware, brought litigation to dismiss a class of cases where San Jose police officers were essentially staging setups where they were soliciting gay men at Columbus Park in the bathroom, and then arresting those men and utilizing police resources in that pursuit, and then turning those cases over to the DA's office, where the DA's office prosecuted those men. And my colleague, Ms. Ware, who is a supporter of my campaign, brought litigation to dismiss those cases because of the discriminatory use of policing and prosecution against gay men. And those cases were all dismissed despite opposition from our incumbent DA's office. So when we talk about ensuring the dignity and safety of our LGBTQ plus community members, it starts with a recognition of their humanity, their needs. It also starts with a demand and a manifestation of police accountability to ensure that police officers are not engaging in discriminatory, unconstitutional, unlawful policing of our LGBTQ plus community members. It also requires a recognition that LGBTQ children and young people are disproportionately impacted by our criminal legal system. They're more likely to be traumatized in their youth. They're more likely to suffer from school discipline and more likely to be fed into our school to prison pipeline. So it's really critical, again, that we invest on the front end of our communities, in our schools, in our classrooms, in our neighborhoods, to ensure that LGBTQ plus youth are seen as full human beings and are receiving trauma-informed care, so that they don't end up in our criminal legal system, so they don't end up homeless and addicted to harmful substances and more likely engaging in harmful behaviors. It's also really critical that our jails and our custody facilities recognize the humanity of LGBTQ plus individuals by ensuring safe housing, by ensuring clothing that is gender appropriate, to ensure that people are being called by the appropriate names. I recently was in a courtroom where a transgender person was being called by the district attorney by a name that was not their chosen name. And it was I, as a public defender, even though that person was the victim in the case, I was the one who stood up before the judge and ensured that this person was called by the appropriate name, and again, afforded their dignity and their humanity. And so that's a representation or an example of my commitment that I will embody once elected, to ensure, again, the dignity and safety of our LGBTQ plus community members here in Santa Clara County and beyond.
Thank you. And so we are going to be transitioning a little bit. So we're going to do some Q&A here. So this is Q&A from those who are listening in. So I believe that we will be transitioning to 1 minute, rounds as far as answers go. And so tomorrow we'll be keeping time for that. And then we will just go back and forth as far as between Mr. Rosen and Mr. Khan. So the first question that we have here for the Q&A, and we'll start off with you, Mr. Rosen, is in what way will your office hold accountability and improve conditions within Santa Clara County's jail? And it says here, a jail that has seen abuse, of neglect, of and death of incarcerated community members.
I think that's a great question. And while the DA does not run the jail, the sheriff runs the jail. there are many things that I've done as DA and that I'll continue to do to try to increase the humanity and the empathy and the compassion within the jail. I went to Germany several years ago with the Vera Institute to study German prisons, which are much more humane and rehabilitative than ours. And part of that experience when I came back to Santa Clara County is looking at ways in which we can improve our jail facilities so that they are more rehabilitative. And that has included things like letting individuals incarcerated wear their own clothes, begin the reentry process as soon as they are come into custody, and providing more programming like the Parent Project from the DA's office. We were the first DA's office to offer that in the jail because what we want is a jail that will rehabilitate individuals so they'll live better lives when they leave.
Time.
Thank you. Yeah, so as you see, tomorrow will be up above and she will be doing her countdown. So thank you.
That's helpful.
All right, go ahead, Mr.
Well, I first want to say that I've been a part of the community collective fighting against the building of a new jail, the allocation of hundreds of millions of our county resources towards a carceral facility, and said instead demanding that we utilize those resources on the front end of our communities for things like mental health treatment, substance abuse, and trauma-informed care so that we can prevent people from ending up in our jails in the first place. The best for re-entry is to never have someone come into our jails unless absolutely necessary. This idea that our jails are more humane under Mr. Rosen's watch is laughable. I'm in our jails. They are not places of healing. They're not conducive to rehabilitation. In fact, it's arguable, and I do argue, that they breed the very harms that we are allegedly turning to them to protect us from. People are not wearing their own clothes. They're called bodies. They're dehumanized. They're separated from their families. They only see their families through glass window visits. That's not conducive to healing.
Time. Sorry.
Thank you so much. So question 2 that we have here is, what victim services would you make available to those who lose loved ones to police violence? And Mr. Rosen, you can.
Under my leadership, the district attorney's office has a victim services unit for the first time in its history, which has more than 40 advocates and claims specialists that serve thousands and thousands of victims of crime every year. Housing, restitution, counseling, any funeral expenses. When an individual is shot and killed by the police, depending on those circumstances, there may be something that the district attorney's victim services unit can do. We're constrained by the law in terms of what services we can offer under what circumstances. And I would just add that when someone is shot and killed by the police, it's a tragedy. Even if the officers did not commit a crime, it's a horrible tragedy. And I make those reports very public, and anyone can see it and decide for themselves what's right.
You're good to go.
So I've sat in community rooms, specifically at Silicon Valley Debug, with families who have lost loved ones to police violence. I've sat not to speak, but to listen. And I've heard countless accounts of people who have lost loved ones to San Jose police officers or to police officers in Santa Clara County being left behind and forgotten, not afforded services, not afforded any sort of victim impact restitution or anything like that, because our DA's office has never prosecuted a single police officer who has shot and killed our fellow human being in Santa Clara County under the watch of Mr. Rosen. And so those people are left without services. They're left without trauma-informed care. It's critical that we hold police accountable when they violate the law. I'm committed to doing that once I'm elected. And it's critical that we ensure that victims of harm, regardless of whether there is a prosecution or a conviction, are afforded services through in order to be healed and whole in our community.
Time.
Okay, Mr. Khan, we will start with you this time for this next question. What is the district attorney's office role in the Board of Supervisors declaration that racism is a public health crisis when an individual group of organizations commits to a racist act?
Thank you. Mr. Rosen mentioned a blog post or blog posts of mine. One of the blog posts that I wrote that became an editorial was after the killing of George Floyd, where I stated publicly Black Lives Matter and called upon our communities to hold our district attorney's offices accountable for their roles in perpetuating the dehumanization of Black lives, for their roles in perpetuating police brutality. And what was the response of our incumbent DA? He filed a complaint against me. He tried to have adverse consequences inflicted upon me for telling the truth and for calling for accountability towards his office. When we talk about racial justice or racial systemic racism as being an epidemic in our communities, it's an epidemic because it flows from the very DA's office that Mr. Rosen is the head of and has been the head of for over 12 years. I've been committed to fighting against systemic racism my entire career as a public defender, and that is the motivation for why I'm running now for Santa Clara County DA, and I will embody this fight once elected.
I think that the best response I can make to that is a piece that all of the Black prosecutors in the DA's office wrote in response to one of the many blog posts that Mr. Khan has put up, many of which he has, of course, hidden and deleted. They wrote the following: while many of us have been attorneys longer than you, we almost assuredly have been Black longer than you. Every Black prosecutor we know became a prosecutor to curb systemic racism and to protect our communities. Your opinion piece, whether intentional or not, Mr. Khan, shows a complete lack of understanding of the role of a prosecutor. To be blunt, Mr. Khan, you have no idea what goes into the decisions to charge, prepare, or prosecute a case. As a defense attorney, you have the luxury of advocating for one client at a time without considering the impact on the larger community. As a prosecutor, we pursue what is just for the victim, the community, and the defendant. Contrary to your assertion.
Sorry, time.
Thank you.
Thank you both. And let me just go ahead and see here if we have any more questions.
So I know that one of our candidates has to leave in a few minutes. I think we could leave it for 1 minute statement for each, final statements. And let's alternate. We'll go to Sajid first.
Thank you all for having me. I never planned to run for Santa Clara County DA. I was and still am proud to be a public defender in this county. But after the killing of George Floyd, there was an outpouring in our community unlike any other before. There was a community demand for Black lives to matter. There was a community demand for an end to police brutality. There was a community demand for transformational change in our Santa Clara County DA's office and across our systems. And we have just seen the groundbreaking nomination and confirmation of Judge Ketanji Brown Jackson to the United States Supreme Court, a former public defender and the first Black woman ever to hold that seat. And there has been a collective understanding and an awakening that public defenders are uniquely qualified and situated to meet this moment, to end the harms of mass incarceration, to address systemic racism, to address police brutality and police discrimination, to breathe life into our Constitution for all people. And in that same spirit, that's why I'm running for DA, because I'm committed to addressing mass incarceration, healing systemic racism, and building a justice system that ensures the dignity and safety of all people. Thank you.
Very good. Rosen?
Every person who lives in our community is entitled to equal justice and fair treatment under the law. And we have worked very hard in the DA's office under my leadership to both reduce crime, which disproportionately impacts communities of color, while at the same time significantly reducing incarceration by more than 50%, again, disproportionately benefiting communities of color. We've shrunk the footprint of the criminal justice system, and we've held police officers and law enforcement officers accountable, and we've done so in a transparent and open way. I'm very proud to have the endorsement of Bob Nunez, who's the president of the San Jose Silicon Valley NAACP. I'm very proud that our Bend the Arc grants that we initiated a few years ago went almost half of them to African-American communities. And I'm going to continue to work with the African-American community to make our community better.
Well, thank you so much, everyone, for joining us this evening. And this has been a great forum, very informative. And I appreciate your time, candidates Sajid Khan as well as Jeff Rosen. So thank you so much. And feel free to add any information you have in the chat. And thank you, Kiana Munoz, one of our youth members. Thank you so much for being able to moderate this forum.
Thank you for having me on.
All right, everyone. So you go ahead and go to that chat if you want to learn more about the candidates. And for those of you who are Afro UPRIS members, you may stay, of course. And anyone who would like to become a member, you can stay to learn more about how you might join Afro UPRIS, the Black Democratic Club. So thank you. This has been very informative. Good luck to you both.
Thank you both.
Thank you.
Thank you.